My spine slammed against the freezing marble of the foyer. Sharp pain shot up my back. Garrett's heavy hands locked onto my wrists. Pinning my arms against the wall, the chandelier above cast a blinding light over Catherine's perfectly manicured fingers. She slowly uncapped a glass syringe. She smiled. It was that warm, polished smile she reserved for charity galas. She leaned in close. The smell of her expensive perfume barely masked the harsh, metallic stench of the black market chemical peel in her hand. I am the only one who loves you enough to tell you you are average, she whispered. The thick, toxic gel hit my jawline. My skin instantly began to blister. Sizzling heat tore through my cheek. I swallowed the scream burning in my throat. I drove my heel straight into Garrett's kneecap. A sick crack echoed in the hall. His grip slipped. I twisted my body, shoved past the heavy oak doors, and sprinted for my car as the acid ate into my face. The cold night air whipped through the open windows of my sedan as I tore down the winding roads of our gated Charlotte neighborhood. My hands shook violently against the steering wheel. I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. Dealing with teenage bullies every single day as a 26-year-old high school teacher gave me a thick skin. I broke up fights. I de-escalated tantrums. I thought I knew how to handle irrational anger. Nothing prepared me for the psychotic break of my own mother. I slapped a thick layer of emergency burn cream from my glove box onto my jaw, wincing as the raw nerve screamed. Catherine and Garrett were not just strict parents. They were the architects of the Sullivan Standard. To the outside world, they were high society philanthropists. Behind the wrought iron gates of their mansion, they were monsters running a $250,000 black market smuggling ring. They trafficked banned cosmetic injectables and lethal prescription-strength diet pills to their elite country club friends. Their obsession with physical perfection funded their lavish lifestyle. I had escaped that house years ago. I gained healthy weight. I embraced my natural skin. I built a life outside their toxic shadow. Catherine viewed my independence as a direct, unforgivable insult to the family brand. Tonight was supposed to be a brief holiday visit. She turned it into an execution of my self-esteem. I pulled into the cramped, poorly lit parking lot of my boyfriend Trevor's apartment complex. His place was tiny, messy, and cluttered with contractor tools. But the moment the deadbolt clicked shut behind me, the suffocating terror in my chest finally loosened. Trevor took one look at my face and moved into action. No useless questions. Just ice. Sterile gauze. And quiet, grounding safety. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The caller ID made my stomach drop. It was Sierra, my 24-year-old sister, the malnourished, heavily traumatized golden child who was still trapped in that house. I answered, expecting Catherine's voice threatening me. Instead, I heard sharp, ragged breathing. I am outside, Sierra whispered. Trevor threw open the front door. Sierra stood there, shivering in an oversized sweater, clutching a battered leather tote bag. Her cheekbones were sharp enough to cut glass. Her eyes were hollow. I pulled her inside. For years, she had defended them. She weighed every morsel of food on a digital scale to appease Catherine. She took the verbal beatings when she accidentally ate a carbohydrate. Today, the spell broke. She watched our parents hold me down and burn my face. The illusion of their love shattered. Trevor heated up a plate of leftover lasagna. He placed it gently in front of her. Sierra stared at it. Her hands trembled. She picked up a fork, bypassed the calculator on her phone, and took a bite. It was the first real meal she had eaten in 5 years without asking for permission. When she finished, she reached into her tote bag and pulled out her old, cracked iPad. She did not steal the physical ledger from Garrett's study. That would have triggered an immediate lockdown. She was far smarter than they ever gave her credit for. For months, under the guise of using the tablet for art references. She had been systematically photographing every single page of Catherine's black market client list, the supplier invoices, and the offshore routing numbers. She tapped the screen. Hundreds of high-resolution images illuminated the dark living room. They broke her spirit for 2 decades. Tonight, she handed me the hammer to shatter their empire. I bypassed the local police entirely. A high school teacher does not have the resources to take down a federal smuggling ring. But Trevor had spent years doing specialized contracting work for a veteran Drug Enforcement Administration agent. We sat in a stairway, windowless federal office the next morning. I slid the compiled dossier across the metal table. I pointed to a specific cluster of invoices. The Charlotte mansion is not just a residence. I said, tapping the address, it is the storage and distribution hub for the entire Eastern Seaboard operation. The agent's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the evidence. Justice is rarely instant. It is a grinding, agonizing process. For 3 weeks, we lived in a state of suspended animation. Sierra stayed in Trevor's apartment. I taught my classes with a bandage covering the chemical burn on my jaw. Behind the scenes, the federal agents used Sierra's photos to quietly orchestrate a series of controlled buys with the overseas suppliers. They built an airtight case. They secured hard, undeniable warrants. The hammer fell on a Saturday night. Catherine was hosting her Crown Jewel charity gala at the country club. She stood at the podium, dripping in diamonds, lecturing the elite crowd about the importance of inner beauty. Federal agents breached the double doors of the ballroom. I was not there to watch it. I did not need a dramatic microphone drop to feel satisfied. The lead agent called me from the scene. He described Catherine's hyperventilating panic. Her perfectly contoured face went pale as the handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists. The crowd of socialites gasped, pulling away from her like she was radioactive. At the exact same moment, a separate tactical team breached the Sullivan mansion. They bypassed the security system, marched straight into the climate-controlled wine cellar, and uncovered 30 boxes of banned, highly toxic injectables hidden behind the vintage Bordeaux. The discovery triggered an immediate civil asset forfeiture. Federal padlocks were slapped onto the iron gates of the estate. Catherine's flawless reputation vaporized in a matter of seconds. The victory was intoxicating. But narcissists do not surrender just because they lose a battle. They possessed hidden offshore emergency funds. Within 48 hours, high-powered defense attorneys secured their release on bail. The trial was set for the following year. Catherine was furious, humiliated, and utterly unhinged. She believed she was a criminal mastermind. She needed someone to punish. She targeted the weakest link. Sierra had enrolled in a local community college to study art. She was finally healing, painting, and breathing freely. On a Tuesday afternoon, Catherine attended a highly publicized country club luncheon, surrounding herself with witnesses to establish a rock-solid alibi. While she sipped champagne, she used a premium third-party courier application to send a reconciliation care package directly to Sierra's campus. It was a beautiful artisan meal from a boutique Charlotte Cattery. It was also heavily laced with a massive, near-lethal dose of her black market diet pills. designed to trigger a massive cardiac event. My phone vibrated in the middle of grading essays. Sierra texted me a photo of the fancy delivery bag. Confused by the sudden peace offering, my chest tightened. My instincts flared. I recognized the caterer's logo instantly. It was Catherine's exclusive vendor. I abandoned my classroom, sprinted to my car, and tore across town. I found Sierra sitting on a campus bench. Unlacing the boutique ribbon, I snatched the container out of her hands before she could take a single bite. I did not confront Catherine. I did not play vigilante. I immediately called the lead federal agent. I handed the contaminated meal directly to him, maintaining a perfect chain of custody. The federal laboratory rushed a toxicology screen. The results were terrifying. The agent secured an emergency warrant for the courier application's digital records. The receipt led directly to Garrett's black credit card. The IP address for the order traced straight back to Catherine's mobile phone, time-stamped at the exact moment she was smiling for photos at her luncheon. The trap snapped shut. Her alibi became her confession. The courtroom air was stagnant and heavy. The judge slammed his gavel down, reading the attempted murder charges aloud. He completely revoked their bail. Catherine lost her high society mask. She screamed wildly, thrashing against the bailiffs as they dragged her toward the holding cells. The civil asset forfeiture had drained their accounts entirely. They had no money left for private lawyers. They faced decades in federal prison. I sat in the wooden gallery bench and exhaled. A massive, crushing weight lifted off my shoulders. When I returned to Trevor's apartment, the messy dining area was gone. Trevor had spent the weekend building a custom sunlit art studio for Sierra. Canvas had leaned against the walls. Fresh paint stained her fingers. She was smiling. I walked into the bathroom and looked at the fading scars on my jawline. They were no longer marks of shame or reminders of weakness. They were the permanent, undeniable badges of a cycle breaker. The judge sentenced Catherine to 12 years in federal prison. Garrett received 10. The court ordered restitution that wiped out whatever scraps of their empire remained. The elite community they worshipped erased them completely. Their names became a cautionary tale whispered at country club dinners. And then, eventually, they were forgotten altogether. 6 months later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It bore the return address of a federal correctional facility. I stood in my kitchen, staring at her neat, cursive handwriting on the envelope. I did not tear it open in a fit of rage. I did not weep over the mother I never had. I calmly walked over to the trash can and dropped it in. I walked away without looking back. That is the reality of surviving a toxic family system. You do not win by screaming the loudest. You win by building a life so beautiful and secure that their toxicity simply cannot survive in your atmosphere. People often ask how I could send my own parents to prison. They use words like loyalty, tradition, and forgiveness. They do not understand the terrifying psychology of narcissistic parents. Abusers like Catherine and Garrett view their children as accessories, not human beings. They weaponize the concept of doing what is best for you to mask their absolute cruelty. They create an environment where the golden child is in just as much danger as the scapegoat, because both identities are consumed entirely by the narcissist's relentless demands. Healing from that level of manipulation requires more than time. It requires a fundamental rewiring of your own reality. It requires you to learn 3 brutal, life-saving rules. Rule number 1 is shattering the myth of the blood debt. Society preaches that family is an unbreakable bond. The truth is, blood simply means you share genetic material. It is a biological fact. not a contract for lifelong emotional indentured servitude. You do not owe your abusers your sanity, your health, or your future just because they gave you life. A parent's job is to protect and nurture. When they choose to destroy you instead, the contract is void. Walking away is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of basic survival. Rule number 2 is understanding that forgiveness is a choice, not a requirement for healing. For years, well-meaning therapists and friends pushed me to forgive and forget to find my own peace. That is a dangerous lie. True peace comes from setting an immovable boundary. Sometimes anger is the very shield that protects your newly built life. You do not have to absolve your abusers to move forward. You are allowed to carry the scars and demand that the people who caused them face the consequences of their actions. Justice is often a much better healer than forced forgiveness. Rule number 3 is realizing that your true identity is found in the rebellion. Abusers systematically target the brightest, most authentic parts of your soul because those are the parts they cannot control. Embracing the exact things they hated about you is the ultimate form of self-actualization. They hated my natural skin. They hated my healthy weight. They hated my independence. Today, I love those things fiercely because they represent the exact elements of my spirit that refuse to break. If you are listening to this and you are sitting in a house where you have to shrink yourself to survive, I need you to hear me clearly. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are being manipulated by people who are terrified of your potential. When the people who share your blood demand you compress your spirit to fit into their twisted world, you must ask yourself a terrifying question. Are you really losing a family by walking away? Or are you finally giving yourself the space to be found? Trust is earned through consistent, loving actions. It is never owed simply because of a shared last name. Build your chosen family. Find the people who celebrate your light instead of trying to extinguish it. Take back your power. Gather your evidence. And protect your peace at all costs. Share this story if you are breaking your own generational curses. Because the cycle stops the moment you decide your dignity is worth more than their approval. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why on earth would Paige even go back to that house for a holiday? Why did Sierra stay for 24 years just to be starved and treated like a prop? It is so easy to judge from the outside. But let me step in here, because we need to break down what actually happens inside a golden prison like the Sullivan Mansion. When you are raised by narcissists, you are not dealing with regular parenting. You are dealing with the slot machine effect. In psychology, they call this intermittent reinforcement. Think about it. If a slot machine took your money every single time without fail, you would stop playing immediately. But what if every once in a while it flashes bright lights and pays out a few shiny coins? You keep pulling the lever. That is exactly how toxic families operate. They starve you. They criticize you. And they tear down your self-esteem. But then they buy you a designer dress or give you a warm smile at a charity gala. Paige and Sierra were not stupid. They were conditioned from birth to be addicted to those tiny crumbs of hope. But when the spell finally broke, look at the absolute tactical masterclass Paige put on. She did not play the victim. And she did not play vigilante. She played chess. First, she used the audit strategy. When Sierra brought her that iPad, Paige did not go to the local police precinct where her wealthy parents probably played golf with the chief. She bypassed local politics entirely and went straight to the federal level. She knew that narcissists operate on illusion, but the federal government operates on paper trails. Scammers absolutely hate details. Second, She executed the ultimate financial buyout, the civil asset forfeiture. Paige understood a street-smart truth. You do not stop a wealthy abuser by simply arresting them. You stop them by turning off the money tap, by pointing the feds directly to the mansion as a storage hub. She seized their assets before the trial even started. She stripped them of their ability to buy high-powered defense attorneys. She bankrupted their power. Finally, look at her chain of custody move. When that poisoned food arrived at the college, Paige did not throw it away in a panic. And she did not storm the country club screaming. She handed the evidence directly to a federal agent. She let their own digital footprint build the coffin. 6 months after the sentencing, I stood in Trevor's tiny apartment and watched Sierra paint for the first time without fear. There were no digital scales on the table, no locked cabinets, no voice outside the door telling her that one bite of food made her weak. Just sunlight, canvas, messy brushes, and the quiet sound of someone learning how to exist without asking permission. The scars on my jaw had faded, but they never disappeared completely. I used to hate them. I used to turn my face away from mirrors, thinking they were proof that Catherine had marked me forever. Now I see them differently. They are not damage. They are evidence. Evidence that I survived. Evidence that I fought back. Evidence that the daughter they tried to shrink became the woman who ended the entire Sullivan empire. Catherine wrote once from prison. Garrett did too. Their letters were full of the same polished poison. They called it misunderstanding. They called it discipline. They called it love. I threw both envelopes away unopened because real love does not pin you to a wall and burn your face. Real love does not starve a daughter until she forgets what hunger feels like. Real love does not package poison in a ribbon and call it reconciliation. People ask if I feel guilty for sending my parents to prison. No, I feel grief for the parents I deserved but never had. I feel sadness for the little girls Sierra and I used to be, standing in a mansion full of mirrors, trying to become beautiful enough to be safe. But guilt, no. Guilt belongs to the people who built their fortune on cruelty and called it family tradition. The truth is, walking away from toxic blood is not betrayal. It is survival. For years, Catherine and Garrett taught us that obedience was love. That silence was respect. That our bodies, our choices, and our identities belong to the Sullivan name. But the moment Sierra handed me that iPad, the spell broke. Their power was never real. It depended entirely on our fear, our shame, and our willingness to keep protecting their image. Once we stopped protecting them, they collapsed. So if you are listening to this from inside your own golden prison, hear me clearly. You are not ungrateful. You are not dramatic. You are not crazy for noticing the cruelty everyone else pretends not to see. Sometimes the people who gave you life are also the people trying hardest to bury who you really are. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to gather proof. You are allowed to protect your body, your money, your peace, and your future. You are allowed to build a chosen family with people who do not make love feel like a punishment. Today, Sierra paints with full hands and eats full meals. I teach my students with my head held high. Trevor still keeps too many tools in the living room. And somehow, that messy little apartment feels more like home than the Sullivan mansion ever did. Because home is not chandeliers, gates, or reputation. Home is safety. Home is truth. Home is the place where nobody asks you to disappear in order to be loved. If this story hit close to home, drop a black heart in the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to break free from people who used family as a weapon? And if you believe dignity is worth fighting for, subscribe for more stories about survival, justice, And the moment the cycle finally ends, the ultimate takeaway here is about leverage. Toxic people derive their power from your silence and your desperate hope that they will eventually change. The moment you accept that they will not, you take your power back. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Even if they share your last name, trust is earned. It is never owed. If you have survived a situation like this, or if you are quietly planning your own exit strategy right now, drop a comment below and share your story. You are not alone in this fight. Hit subscribe for more breakdowns. And always remember, your dignity is not up for negotiation.